How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? I'm doing this in the garden again this week. As you can probably see from the background over, where are we? There. I said I'd have a look at the UK specifically in terms of where the place stands in the New World Order. Unfortunately, it's not a pretty sight. Let's look at things from a commercial point of view. This is, after all, supposed to be a blog about matters concerning real estate. And if you are about to buy a property or about to move to a different country, one of the things you need to consider is whether that country's economy is likely to hold up. If the economy is on skid row, then the money markets are going to be tough. That will affect the cost of money, which in turn will affect what your house purchase will cost you in the monthly basis. If you're feeling smug that you don't need to borrow to buy, then I hope you are calculating the opportunity cost. If not, I will explain why this is important in a later blog. If you are looking to move abroad, you need to think about your house purchase as similar to investing in a company. Only in this instance, you'd be investing in real estate in that country. So you'd better check out the country. If you're intending to buy a house in France, then you are effectively investing in La Belle France plc. For a state to be successful, it needs to have a few basic things going for it. First and foremost, there are the three basics that any country needs to have covered: security, food, and energy. Security. There are two sides to this, of course. The first is to have a security threat, which the UK most certainly has. But the question has to be asked, is this in a form which can be used? The answer is probably no. It may be a deterrent to anyone else attacking the UK physically. The concept of MAD, mutual assured destruction, ensures this. Why attack if there's a good chance that the retaliation will wipe out the aggressor? Unfortunately, I do wonder whether the whole concept of fighting battles is on the way out. The UK can probably be overcome militarily over the course of about 6 weeks with a simple blockade. See the next two essential points. There is also the small matter of real battles. We have reached a technological stage in the craft of war where I believe it is impossible to win a war just by military means. Any modern war would either end in mutual destruction, a Pyrrhic victory, or would never end. All three outcomes are hopelessly unacceptable. The other side to security is simplicity itself. Be a nice neighbour. Don't needlessly annoy your neighbours. It used to be called diplomacy. In short, you don't start weaponising things which haven't been weaponised before. Why make life difficult for yourself? What on earth was the point of the UK annoying Russia? The actions of that buffoon Johnson in Kiev and Istanbul were tantamount to a declaration of war on Russia. Why do that, when the country depends for most of its energy and foodstuff from Russia? A few years ago, it was a very friendly country. It even applied to join the EU and NATO. The security situation can be summed up very simply. It would take a foreign power roughly 6 weeks to blockade the UK into starvation. I'm going to give that aspect of the country's basics 0. Next comes food. The country relies on imports for approximately 80% of its agricultural needs. That means the country is woefully at risk and clearly is vastly overpopulated. It also means the agricultural sector and the fishing industry are woefully under-supported. This is a problem that will persist as long as the UK keeps kowtowing to the EU, which is concerned to keep the UK dependent. Fancy people whose food is dependent upon foreigners seeking to give the food they do have, fish, to those very foreigners. Mad. Totally mad. What is going on here? The UK is dependent upon Washington regarding defence and teetering on reliance on the EU for food. Doesn't sound too wonderful to me, especially as the EU is also a province of the USA in all except name. Doubt that? You have to be going through life with your eyes shut. The US bombs international infrastructure, half of which belongs to Germany. And the German politicians not only let them do it, but accept what is clearly an act of war. How can I give the UK any more than 0 for the security of its food supplies? Okay, since we've touched on Nord Stream, let's turn our attention to energy. Without access to cheap and reliable energy, the modern way of life regresses to that put up with by folks way back in the Middle Ages. Wind power isn't consistently strong enough to deliver anything remotely like even a baseload power source. It won't power any kind of large-scale industry or the accoutrements of modern living. Solar power in the UK is, well, quite frankly, it's a fairy's dream. The UK has industries that require energy to function, relocating to India and China as I write this. And that is a policy for the benefit of the British taxpayer? More madness. The US Department of Energy reckons that by 2035 the US will be able to support 38% of its economy on renewable energy. So you shut it off now? We already have the state of California telling its residents to stop using their electric cars because the grid can't handle the load. You can't make up this stuff, it's surreal. Oh yes, and California is under several feet of snow. No doubt what the wonks call more global warming. Oddly, the USA is self-sufficient in energy and doesn't need to behave in this way. It's the same in the UK, actually. The country has enough energy within its boundaries to survive very nicely, thank you. So in theory, the country gets 100% on that one. Except the government, in its infinite wisdom, upsets its main supplier and now has to rely on vastly overpriced supplies from the USA, which is running out of supplies itself. All the while the UK refuses to develop the homegrown energy sources, so what should come out as 100%, oh dear, has to be another 0%. That's 3 zeros, dear oh dear oh dear. And that's for the central requirements for a safe and prosperous country. As I say, you couldn't make all this up. It's all too surreal. But let's move on now to the less fundamental aspects of British life. We find that the bad news just keeps coming. 70% of foreign exchange comes from the banking system in the City of London. Those of you who are ardent EU fans, please do remember that the EU intention is that all that financial expertise should be centralised in Frankfurt. The day that happens, the British economy sinks into oblivion. Not a problem if the Brits don't have to import energy. Not a problem if the Brits don't have to import food. But of course they have to import both. And without the foreign exchange, there won't be any foreign exchange money to buy it. I could go further into this, but this is supposed to be a 10-minute blog. Those of you who live in the UK or depend upon its economy to support you should be asking yourselves whether you are living where you are treated best. And do remember, when the ghastly reality of the green agenda gets really into gear, life is going to be even harder without all the power sources you've been used to. In other words, are you going to be treated well in the UK in the future? Quite recently, another business in the northeast closed down due to the green restrictions. It moved to India, where it immediately opened up producing the same products, but this time using cheaper coal to power the machinery. Result? More unemployment in the northeast of England. more money spent importing the goods that were originally produced in England, with all the attendant extra costs and the extra transport required, pumping more carbon into the atmosphere, and the goods are now produced using a dirtier power source, coal, all in the name of the green agenda. I just don't get it. You guys are ruled by a bunch of total idiots. I happen to think it's worse. By my definition, they're guilty of treason. I said it in one of my songs, the freaks are in control. Presumably you guys voted them in. I hope you're pleased with the way things are going. All I can say is not for me. Oh yes, and I almost forgot the property market. Unless there are massive changes seriously soon, UK real estate as an investment will be history. The people living there will be living in penury if much more damage is done to the City of London's banking system. Remember that figure? It produces 70% of the UK's foreign exchange. And that, if you remember, is needed to buy 80% of the UK's agricultural imports and most of its energy. So, with the EU in control, you can say goodbye to that as well. Also, that lunatic Johnson has made sure that London is no longer a safe haven for gold deposits, as he weaponised them. Now, rather a lot of gold will be leaving those vaults for safer places in the future. And with the future hard currencies being based upon commodities, the countries with no apparent commodities will be stuck with toilet paper instead of real money. I'm sorry guys, but unless there is a massive change in the UK's political stance, I advise you to leave pretty darn soon. Another 5 years and you won't have a country to save, and your real estate will be garbage. It's that bad. Okay, see you next week. Meanwhile, bear up.